Why did some clone commanders refuse to execute Order 66? After all, the order was supposed to be absolute. And when Chancellor Palpatine uttered the words, a galaxy-wide massacre began. Jedi across the stars were cut down by the very clone troopers they had led into battle. Brothers who turned without hesitation. That betrayal, the immediate, reflexive obedience, is what made the event so devastating. But not all clones complied. Some paused, some questioned.
Stay back! I was framed because I know the truth. There's a sinister plot in the works against the Jedi.
Execute Order 66.
What's Order 66?
And one squad in particular, Ion Team, under the command of Captain Clymer, refused. The story of Captain Clymer is told in Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader by James Luceno, and it's not really discussed all that much, but it does offer a very devastating glimpse into the conscience, individuality, and what happens when you resist a system built on control. So let's begin with who Captain Clymer actually was. He was a commander of the Ion Team. This was a clone commando unit stationed on Mercana, a separatist world, in the final days of the Clone Wars. He had served alongside the Jedi, and he developed strong moral instincts, something that, as we know now, was not erased by the inhibitor chips installed during cloning. When Order 66 was issued, Clymer and his team were given the same directive as every other clone battalion: execute all Jedi immediately. But they didn't obey. Why? Because on Mercana, the Jedi with them had done nothing suspicious. There was no sudden betrayal, no attack, no sign of sedition, just allies, officers, men they had served with and bled beside. On page 79 of Dark Lord, when Vader arrives to investigate the lapse, Clymer explains, "The order made no sense at the time," Clymer said. "We thought it might be a separatist trick." This response is very important, and it's not because it shows cowardice or indecision, but because it shows critical thinking. Clymer didn't simply disobey out of defiance. He assessed the situation. He questioned the legitimacy of the order, and in doing so, he made a decision that would seal his fate. So let's take a moment here and examine the mythology of the clones in general. So in the prequels, and especially in the Clone Wars, we learn that despite their genetic sameness, clones develop individuality. They name themselves, they bond, they question. Clones like Rex, Fives, Cody, and Wolf all display unique temperaments and ethics. So when Order 66 happens, the chips override that, but it doesn't work equally in all cases. Factors like distance from Jedi influence, timing, and conditioning seem to affect how strongly the chip asserts control. In Clymer's case, the influence of Jedi leadership, combined with the chaos of Mercana's battlefield, was enough for his free will to survive the command. This makes his choice a tragedy, because when Vader arrives, there is no commendation, no investigation, just judgment. Vader, now fully entrenched as the Emperor's enforcer, doesn't see Clymer's decision as noble. He sees it as treason, and more importantly, he sees it as a threat. Proof that loyalty can fracture, that obedience is not guaranteed, that even the most conditioned soldiers can hesitate. On page 95, Vader confronts Clymer directly and says, "They weren't your allies, squad leader. They were traitors, and you sided with them." When Clymer tries to explain further, Vader ignites his saber, and Ion Team doesn't really have a chance to defend themselves. Not that they really could anyways. The commando unit is cut down in cold blood by the man who was once a Jedi. This was more of a purge of the truth for Vader. His decision to kill Clymer and his men is deeply symbolic. It confirms a shift not just in ideology, but in identity. There is no longer Anakin Skywalker, who fought side by side with clone troopers, who named them, respected them, and disobeyed the Council to protect them. This is Darth Vader, and Darth Vader needs order. He cannot afford gray areas. He cannot allow questioning. And most of all, he cannot look at a clone like Clymer and see himself. Because if Clymer is right, then Vader is wrong. Now, what also makes this moment even more tragic is that Clymer's hesitation mirrors what Anakin should have done. Clymer questioned the system. Anakin didn't. Clymer hesitated before killing Jedi. Anakin led the massacre. Clymer paid with his life. Anakin survived, but lost everything. including the lives of the ones he loved around him. Let's also consider the broader implications of this act, that Palpatine wanted clones not just for military efficiency, but for control, and Order 66 was the final safeguard. It ensured that the Jedi, who could think, question, and feel, would be eliminated by soldiers who could not. But Ion Team proved that some clones could think, that the programming wasn't perfect, and that made them dangerous. Vader's execution of Clymer wasn't about punishment, it was about erasure. Erasure of proof that even within the Empire's perfect system, cracks had already formed. Now in the Clone Wars, we see this theme build towards Order 66. Characters like Fives and Rex discover the chip conspiracy. They fight to resist it. Fives is killed before he can warn the others, and Rex survives thanks to Ahsoka's intervention. And Wolf, as we see later, removes his chip and goes into exile. Clymer's case is different. His chip didn't malfunction. His conscience overrode it. Kind of like how Rex did in season 7, but look, that was done with Disney, and I just think that that's different from this time, which was written during George's era. Now, his conscious overriding it makes his death perhaps the most significant clone death in the early Imperial era, and I would even argue maybe the entire Imperial era. Because it wasn't the chip that failed, it's not like it malfunctioned, it was the Empire's illusion of total control. Now on page 98, James Lucena writes, Vader didn't mourn them, he couldn't afford to, emotion clouded purpose, purpose served order, and order was the only thing that mattered now. This line is really important in the book because it shows that Vader chooses numbness as a coping mechanism. He cannot grieve Clymer, even if part of Anakin wants to. He cannot see the clones as people, because if he does, then he's still a Jedi, and he can't afford to be that man anymore. So why did Captain Clymer refuse to execute Order 66? Well, because somewhere buried beneath his armor, training, and designation was a man who understood that loyalty is not blind. That orders without ethics are not orders, they are weapons. And Clymer refused to become one. He paid for that decision with his life, but his legacy is clear. He proved that even in a galaxy engineered for submission, conscience can survive. And for Vader, well, that survival was unacceptable because it reminded him of everything that he had killed, including most of himself. And I say most because he never truly killed Anakin Skywalker. He maybe killed 99.9% of him, but there were still some fragments left that eventually were enough to bring him back to 100%. Let's take a moment of silence for Captain Clymer. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like on it for the next one, and I will see you all very soon. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.